How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Bright Verde podcast. We have a very special guest in today's episode. This is episode 14. Obviously, with everything that's going on around the world, I wanted to use my platform to allow different opinions, different voices. And I also wanted to talk about everything that's going on, which is the Black Lives Matter movement, the protest, George Floyd's death, murder, I want to say.
Murder. Murder.
So with that being said, let's welcome our very first special guest in this podcast history, Imani Williams, or is
Williams
it
is
W
fine.
or with a V?
It's Williams is good.
Okay, Williams. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's been so crazy. But through all the madness, soccer is one of those things that can bring us all together. So it's kind of like one of the best times to talk about that, because I think, unlike a lot of sports in America, soccer really depends on the camaraderie and the quality of the club you have usually depends on like how strong the fan culture is. If you've got really strong fan culture, you can have a lot of power in terms of like what you're able to affect in terms of like the play on the field. So so for really big, successful, newer clubs, when Orlando first came on the scene, when Portland came on the scene, when Seattle came on the scene, with Atlanta, they've done something incredible. And you can kind of see how getting that huge grassroots support and that huge kick of momentum from the beginning can literally carry a club on from the start. I mean, I think I knew Atlanta was excited for them, but I didn't think they were going to kick off their like MLS like legacy the way they've done it so far. And it's kind of exciting for Austin FC.
Correct.
We've got some really good, we've got a really good chance to do things here. We've got the backing of the city. We've got McConaughey on our team. It feels good, man.
It does. It's really exciting. And we actually had a meet and greet with Claudio Reina, who is a sporting director. And in that meet and greet, it was so cool to hear him talk about. Obviously, he launched the NYCFC franchise, and that how successful that was. And when he compares it, like he wants Austin FC to be talked about in the same realm as the Atlantas, as the NYCFCs, and it's super exciting for Austin because this is our first ever professional team. So
Yeah,
it's gonna be really cool.
Listos.
Yeah. Okay, so where are you currently? You're in the Netherlands?
Yeah, so currently I'm abroad right now. I've been stuck over here kind of since COVID-19, and I've wanted to come back. At the same time, like, maybe it's the best thing for me to be out here. I know that a lot of countries have just like, extended visas and everything because they know it's really hard for people to travel right now. So that's been really difficult. It's kind of like, but it's actually been a great opportunity for me to kind of experience another culture when it comes to even coronavirus, and how like the groupthink mentality that a culture can build can actually get people through crisis. So like, being in the Netherlands during COVID-19, like, no one ever really ran out of food here. No one ever ran out of toilet paper. They never ran out of beer. There was always alcohol. Like, no one panicked. They had hand sanitizer. They had everything really, and there's a culture here of really not consuming more than what you need. So like everybody never really buys two of everything. So like if you went to the grocery store, like even during the height of everything going on, like you never buy more than two or something, because everyone else will like look at you and just be like, no, that's not how we do things.
It's a culture thing.
It is very much a culture thing. And I think that also like, if you can, like, the Netherlands is one of the most free countries in the world on the World Freedom Index. They're at number 5 and we're at number 11. And they believe in the freedom of choice. Like, the government's not really going to tell you to do much that like, doesn't like, they don't, like, for example, the police aren't armed here. Like, nobody really has guns here. There's not like a lot of like limitations, but like, marijuana's legal, mushrooms are legal, but like almost nobody really smokes weed. Almost nobody does mushrooms, like,
Right.
because like
it's available, but
yeah.
that factor of like, ooh, I'm gonna do this is gone.
Yeah, it loses its edge completely.
Right.
It really does. And it's been interesting to be how the Dutch determine freedom. They have this concept of like freedom from, like America wants freedom from tyranny, freedom from God
Mm-hmm.
knows what. And in the EU, it's freedom too. So freedom to do things, freedom to be places, freedom to go places. And because like there's a history of like the Holocaust and World War II here, they were very much like, especially in the Netherlands, because literally the Netherlands was just like taken over. They were literally just like, we're not going to lock you in your homes because we know that we don't want to restrict freedom that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it was kind of interesting in that sense to kind of witness what it was like if people just said collectively like, we're not going to hoard, we're not going to panic, because the truth is this, right? Technically, coronavirus shouldn't change anything that you normally do in terms of food consumption,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
But what will change food consumption and what will hurt the supply chain is like a situation where everybody all of a sudden goes to buy 2 months of food. So all of a
Right.
sudden, like, yeah. So that's why all of a sudden the grocery stores are empty. And it was really tough because like even like watching from here before I switched careers, I was a frontline worker. I was a healthcare worker. I
Mm-hmm.
worked for 7 years at Yale New Haven Hospital. And like I would have been in that situation where maybe I'm getting off at like midnight and like going to
Mm-hmm.
the 24-hour grocery store because I'm just trying to pick something up that I have for the next day, and like nothing's available,
Right.
and that's so difficult. But I hope we can learn from this, and I think that people did learn. I think after like that initial like first like 2-3 weeks and the absolute panic going on, it kind of subsided a bit. They found out, remember, they didn't really know much about the virus in the beginning, so they found out about that. um, but yeah, it's been interesting to see how it is here. And the policing here is very much like, they ask you to socially distance, there's signs, but like no one's going to be putting anybody in handcuffs. Like that's not happening here.
Wow.
Nobody's like, yeah, like nobody's IDing people in the streets. You're not going to get stopped for being out. Like a lot of the EU is policed by consent, so you have to have someone's consent to like ask them questions. You can't just arrest somebody because you assume something about them.
Mm-hmm.
um, in the UK, this is especially the case where they have to like they have to ask you questions, you answer the questions, and they like determine um, what to do after. For example, if they ask you like, can you show me your ID, and you say no, that's like, they're like, okay. And then they're like, well, have you been arrested? And you say no. They're like, okay, well, have a nice day. Like you can walk away. You can like
Wow. That's
if you're,
insane to
it's
think
it's
about.
policing by respect. It's a social contract. It's respect based. People in Europe have worked really hard for like their freedom and their rights, because in Europe uh, they're coming away from a feudal system, like a social caste system of worker, soldier,
Mm-hmm.
um, the aristocracy. And for a long time, people who were fiefs and tenant farmers, they like were pretty much relegated to slavery. That is the truth. There's a lot of working class solidarity that crosses borders between Black Lives Matter and the working class movement
Mm-hmm.
in the UK and the rest of Europe. And they're definitely working class people, so they take their rights and freedoms very seriously, because until recently, most monarchies in Europe, uh, they had complete control until the last like couple hundred years or so. But these places are old. Like you've got 500-year-old buildings that have been maintained. They've been
Right.
maintained for 500 years, and people have a lot of pride in where they come from, and they really strong trades, and it's definitely a an economy that tries to take care of its people, especially in these individual countries.
Yeah. So that's it's insane. And that's, I'm a big history buff. Like I love history, and
Yeah.
to me, like I've never visited Europe, and it's one of my, I have to do it very soon, and I can't imagine walking through those buildings where they have 500, 1,000 years of history. Like I would absolutely flip if I saw that.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I always say, like, if somebody decides they do want to come to Europe, like right now they're closed for tourism. I don't think tourism is allowed here until June 15th. I don't think international tourism is going to be around for a while, but like if people are able to budget travel, like you can go to
Hmm.
Europe for 4 or 5 days. You don't have to plan the most luxurious trip. You could stay in a hostel. Okay,
Hmm.
you and a friend or you and four friends could rent a hostel, stay in some beds. You can rent a bed for like $25 a night, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
if you
cheap.
stay for 4 days, 100 bucks, go see Paris, go see Rome, go see Berlin, go see something different, go see people live a different way. And like,
Hmm.
if you make those trips and you kind of do it on a budget, and it's cheaper if you prioritize what's important to you. Like, do you want to have historical experiences? Do you want to have more authentic cultural experiences? Do you want to explore the music scene? Do you want to explore the nightlife? It just depends on where you are. And it's really interesting because you see how people live, and it's the same but different. Like,
Hmm.
Americans like everything bigger, like everything's bigger in
Yeah.
Texas,
Yeah.
and like, yeah, yeehaw, man. like yeehaw, motherfuckers. But like genuinely, like here it's not really like that. Everyone lives a lot closer together. Like, Europeans are very conscious of public space and
Hmm.
personal space people are conscious of, but then they're also conscious of public space. So
Hmm.
like, you'll rarely hear somebody like honking their horn. You'll not really hear like a lot of traffic. In the Netherlands, people cycle.
A lot.
Cycling, yeah, they cycle so much. There are more bikes than there are people, and
Yeah.
it cuts down on traffic. People are healthier. The cities are quieter. And it just makes life so different. Like, you don't have to really buy a vehicle here. There's high
Hmm.
speed trains. The buses work. They're clean. They have Wi-Fi. Like, everything is very efficient. But
Everything just
that's
works.
but they work hard at it, my friend. I just say I've never seen construction workers work faster than in the Netherlands. I've never seen buildings go up. I've seen them tear up entire streets and they're done in like 2 days. Like,
Wow.
it's insane. They have a lot of like they have a traditional trade culture here. So you'll
Hmm.
have like, your butchers and your bakers and people who are descendants of like smiths, and then your carpenters and other tailors. There's all sorts of stuff that like the carpentry and the masonry here is beautiful. And like, it
Hmm.
could tell it has a long history, and it's in their working class societies. They're working class organizations, and they're very, very proud of their history. Like, people, there's cheesemakers here. Like, all the fancy stuff that we think is European, like, isn't fancy for Europe. like,
Right.
all the cheeses, all the wine, like, it's not fancy for here. They don't have to pay the import taxes or anything. All the bakeries, like, the things that Americans don't understand is like going to the bakery like every day or every couple of days. And it's just a bakery that breaks your bread. It's not like somewhere that you're going to go get cupcakes. Like,
Right.
and
Right.
yeah, so
And
it's
yeah, it's
interesting.
like these guys have been doing this for centuries. Like, people don't realize, I guess, the US is a fairly young country, you know. These people have been doing this for centuries. So they got it down, and they understand how things work. Um Speaking, you said you were a healthcare worker in New
Yeah.
Haven. So
Hmm.
how did you go from Connecticut, or tell me a little bit about Connecticut? I know you did some work with the American Outlaws,
Yeah.
with the Liverpool. Is it a supporters group?
Yeah, there's one over there. Yeah.
Yeah. And how did you go from that to Netherlands?
Well, to be honest with you, like, I've always had a passion for travel.
Hmm.
I've always believed that people can have a better understanding of who we all are if we just spend more time trying to understand each other,
Hmm.
understand one another. So it's a long story. Like, the first time I went to Europe, I was like 19, and like, I really wanted to go see Real Madrid versus Liverpool in the
Nice.
Champions League, and I was like gonna do it, and I was determined to do it. And I mean, I made it happen. It wasn't a very long, like, actually no, it was a long trip, but it was like very much like something that I really planned on doing. And I literally designed the whole trip around that game. So I was in Spain in February. If you want to go to Europe, don't go in the summer. Don't ever go in the summer because it's crowded with tourists and it's miserable.
Mm-hmm.
If you just want to experience like what normal life is like, definitely go in the off season. You can go in like September, October. I mean, if you're going to go to like Spain or Italy, you can go like to like southern Italy or Spain in February or March, and it's okay. It's not that cold. Springtime is great to go. Like if you go like April or May, like even like right after like graduation season, like that early, like second, third week of May, tickets are usually a lot cheaper than in the summer when all the other kids are out, and it just becomes like hell. I've never seen like, I'm originally from New York as well, and like when you're a New Yorker, you don't go to Times Square like ever.
Right.
Like you avoid it like the plague. You know what I mean? And like so like being in Paris, I think I went to the Women's World Cup last summer, and I think that like my friends were like in the Louvre, and they were like, "Oh, come find us in the Louvre. Like we don't really have service. We're just." I was like, "Okay." I went to the Louvre like at like noon on a Saturday in like July, and it was like hell.
Insane.
Yeah, it just smelled like sweaty children. Like that locker room is sweaty. Like there's too many people in here. Like loud. Like it was insane. But people think that like going to Europe is like this fancy thing, and like it's really like not nowadays. Like I don't know what's gonna happen now with COVID-19. Hopefully travel still is affordable, but we just went through this huge period of affordable travel. It kind of sucks because Norwegian Airlines had just opened a hub in Austin. I literally booked my trip to Amsterdam for $265,
Yeah,
which is
that's
pretty
cheap.
insane. Yeah, and
Wow.
if you book one-way flights, like let's say you want to go watch football, right? You want to go watch a soccer match. You want to go see like a big club, maybe a huge fan of Liverpool or Real Madrid or whatever, and you want to go watch a game, let's say. Um, Never book a round trip flight to Europe because like you leave from a different place that you entered. So
Right.
like you might go to the UK, hang out there, take the train to Paris, or fly over to the Netherlands for like $80. It's just to hop right over. You could take a bus too if you wanted. I think it cost me like $40 to take a bus from Paris to Amsterdam, air conditioned and all that, and that's an easy
Wow.
decision to make. So you can do it like cheaply, but you just have to be strategic about it. Definitely like try to go with some friends. Airbnbs and everything are always cheaper if you go with friends. You can try to just stay in hostels. You can do volunteer work. There's a whole volunteerism industry where you can do volunteer work, and basically they'll provide you with a place to stay while you're traveling abroad if you do some work for them. So it's quite like interesting. But for me, that kind of changed my perspective on policing. My first trip to Europe was in 2009, and I remember I went to Real Madrid, Liverpool, and I'm a huge Liverpool fan. I just remember like seeing them all like jumping up and down and going crazy, and everybody's open container in the streets, and everybody's drinking and having a good time and singing, and it's rocking, and these people are like taking over this city, and like it's not our city, you know what I mean? Like, so you would think that people would be a little bit more hostile, but it's Real Madrid. They're a big club. People are used to visiting supporters, but it was kind of crazy to be in the Plaza Mayor drinking beer, and literally it was on the cover of my like fourth grade Spanish textbook, and
Wow.
to be drinking beer and watching soccer there, about to like watch two of the biggest clubs was absolutely insane, and that passion that I saw from Liverpool kind of spurred me on to do more with American Outlaws, spurred me on to do more building a soccer community in my local community in New Haven. That became like a real passion of mine. And yeah, like You'll Never Walk Alone for me has been an absolutely huge thing. And if Austin FC wants to look at the success of supporters culture, they should look no further than Liverpool. Liverpool is the best
Right.
football supporters culture in the world. Okay, they are the world's best club. Still, still European champions, still European champions of the world.
I see you got that Mo Salah jersey in the back. I see that.
Yeah. It's chilling out. I'm representing for Austin FC as well.
Hey.
Yay. Um, and basically like like if you want to go like and don't try to wait for all your friends. If you wait for all your friends, it'll never happen. Someone will always have an excuse Someone will always cancel last minute. Everybody's got that one friend that
Right.
always waits. Like you spend 6 months planning something, and then someone's like a week before, a day
Oh,
before,
sorry,
they're
man.
like,
Something came up.
yeah, oh, and you're just like, whatever. So like, don't wait for that. But definitely, like, one of the best things about soccer, I say football because like I grew up in like Irish pubs, and they would correct me. They'd
Of
be like,
course.
you're gonna hang out with us, you're calling it football, and I was like, all right. That's an
Bet.
easy one. That's easy to do.
Yeah.
Like, if that's all you want from me, all right, that's fine. I can make that concession. Um, and yeah, it's all good, man. Like, and yeah, you learn so much from other cultures, and it's amazing. Like, I've watched football all over the world, and I work online, and I travel, and I just, for a long time I was just wondering like where my place was in the world, and football actually helped me kind of figure that out, because everything they're telling you about how people can't come together is a lie. It's not true, because when
Right.
you watch what happens when people actually do come together, and you've got that same crest on, and people have a reason to start talking to each other and getting along, and everything like that, then only good things happen, my friend.
That's so
But
true.
yeah.
That's
Hmm.
beautiful. Um, okay, so I want to get into uh some of the real issues that are going on. Um, so unless people have been living under a rock, we know what happened with George Floyd.
Yeah.
Um, Not only with George Floyd, with many other um,
Too
Black
many.
Americans who have unfortunately been killed by police.
Yeah.
Um, what do you make of these protests? And obviously, we have to differentiate between protesters, people that are rioting, people that are looting. There's a vast difference between um, those people. What do you make of the current state in America, especially when it comes to Black America and the issues that you guys are facing in this country?
Well, Black working class Americans are dying, and I think that's one thing I want to point out is that everyone's facing racial discrimination, but the chances of you being murdered by a police officer are a lot higher if you don't have like an educational institution or something like that protecting you, like somebody that could pay your bail, somebody that knows someone that could, like, say, oh, it's a misunderstanding. And Black, it's usually like in like working class Black neighborhoods these things are happening. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for Ahmaud Arbery, who's just like literally just
Jogging.
jogging, that poor man. It's really, really terrible. But in terms of like police brutality, um, what's happening now here is like we're seeing like a resurgency and like a mentality that America should have already done away with. There are some people who want to take the law into their own hands so much that they become the law. And quite frankly, it's too easy in the United States to become a police officer. It takes like 10 years to become a doctor. You've got to go through rigorous training. You've got to go through school. You've got to go through residency, but it takes like a year maximum to become a police officer. And that's if you spend like 6 months getting in shape.
Hmm.
Like so like it takes you years to work in a hospital environment where you're literally making life or death decisions every single day, but it like doesn't really like take that long to get into a position where you're allowed to take life. We're allowed to
Right.
take life. And I definitely think police should be trained more. I think people should stop demonizing police officers, because I just don't think that's right. I'm from a military and police family, and I just don't think it's right to demonize officers, but I absolutely think officers need more training. I think they need to get rid of the bad cops. There's definitely more of a few of them. I think for sure that like people need to learn de-escalation techniques. I think they need to stop letting things like the Israeli police force be teaching people chokeholds and stuff. Like they're using Krav Maga, Israeli Defense Force tactics in their takedowns, and they almost look so excited that they finally get to use it on someone.
Right.
When you have like yeah, when you have 250-pound men beating up 100-pound women and putting them in chokeholds, that's not really policing. That's intimidation. I don't
Hmm.
really know what their purpose is, but it's not cool. In terms of protests, protests are good. Protests work. The only way you make change is if you make people uncomfortable. At the same time, looting is terrible and bad, and rioting is terrible and bad. what we do need to separate is, do not let people call protests a riot, because they're not the same
They're
language.
different.
Okay, they are very much different, and I think that Dr. King had the right idea. Peaceful protest is the way to go. I think that there is some nefarious work going on in this country, and that yeah, the insurrection, like when Donald Trump's trying to roll out tanks against his own people, and you wonder why American education is being defunded, and then you see all these guys roll out in all their combat gear, and they're supposed to be protecting us, and they look more like they're ready for a fight. We also, it happened with that poor old man who not
Right.
only was
In
pushed to the
Buffalo.
ground, yep, not only was he pushed to the ground, but he was also kind of left there. They kind of was like, no, leave him. And it's just like, wow, way to desensitize someone. You're supposed to protect and serve, and nobody's elders should ever be treated like that. You have to have a social contract with the police. Like, you're giving them a lot of authority, and they have to be able to not abuse that. And right now, what's going on is like everyone is being hurt for no reason. These guys are power hungry and power sick, and because they don't really have to have like rigorous training or even an education completely, then they're not really learning like how to wield that power appropriately. I definitely think that it'd be really cool if they did something like, well, you get in the police academy, and like you have to be in the police academy for like 4 years, but then you also get a college degree and it's paid for, like, or
Hmm.
like 50% of it's paid for, or like 30, 70% of it's paid for. So you're coming out with like a degree in like psychology, also.
That sounds
You know,
interesting. Yeah, that's
yeah, it
interesting.
makes sense, and it would just help people understand people a little bit better, because you also have to get a general education to maintain it or earn a degree like that as well. But like, I also think that like being a police officer should be how you get the degree. Like, I don't want, like, it shouldn't be a case where policing is not a working class job. Like,
Hmm.
policing should be a job that working class people can aspire to be, because college is very, very expensive. So I don't know what way they would kind of change that, but I definitely think that'd be really cool to have, like, um, because I think it just helps people kind of understand what's happening. Like, 90% of the police officers in the UK are unarmed. Okay, they don't carry weapons, they don't carry guns. Things are fine, and if they're not fine, people still aren't dying in the streets. Like, nobody's dying in the streets there. I think Norway, eight people have been killed by police officers in Norway since 2002.
Wow.
2002, only 8 people in all of Norway have been killed by police officers. So when people say there's no other way, there's not a way, what are they supposed to do? It's like, there's plenty of ways. I mean, in terms of football, hooliganism in the 80s was crazy. In the 70s and 80s, hooliganism was really, really difficult. In certain parts of Eastern Europe, hooliganism is still happening. Unfortunately, like South
Right.
America and other parts of the world, sure. But and for the big clubs in Europe, they pretty much eradicated hooliganism by the time they got into like, the mid 90s. Mid 90s, early 2000s, it was completely gone. With the exception of a few scuffles, you still got to watch yourself if you're going to play any Italian clubs. But um, for the most part, like, hooliganism's kind of done. But two things happened. They stopped treating fans like animals. They're like, if you're going to cage us in, if you're going to treat us like animals, then don't be surprised if we act like it. So that's one of the reasons why all the pens came down in England. I know they still have them in Germany, but there's no fence in front of you watching games in the UK. It's They've also policed themselves. So community leaders and groups have been like, you know what, this is not how we want to be perceived anymore. We're not gonna, like, go embarrass our city, embarrass our club by our behavior. Because when you're from a place and you put on the colors, like, basically you become a representative yourself of your city, and your
Right.
conduct is representative of yourself and your city. So like, you have to make sure you show your best self, or else you're doing your people a disservice. And I think that it's important to kind of have community pride. I think that Austin, like, has so many different cultures, and through various points in history they've kind of been separated. Football is like, soccer is a great opportunity to kind of like bring everyone together and kind of put them all on the same page, and you kind of have the context already that we're all on the same team. Nobody's questioning, like, are we here to stand with each other or not? Like, we know the answer is yes. Okay, it's gonna be loud, it's gonna be crazy. I think we're gonna build something really special over there, and we're gonna give people a light in their life. Like, some people, like, don't get exposure to diversity. They don't get exposure to people from other cultures,
Mm-hmm.
or it's very, very limited, very secular, or it's in a sterile setting, like you're in the workplace. Like, it's not real life.
It's not organic.
No, it's not organic at all. But soccer kind of gives us this unique opportunity to kind of come together as a community. And yeah, like, it's incredible. But yeah, like, police at soccer matches in Europe, they've got football matches and fan support in Europe looks more like a riot than these protests do. They've got the
Mm-hmm.
flags, the smokes, the banners. Okay, everybody's singing and shouting. Like, literally, like, it's crazy if you look at some of the footage of what just like a normal march to the stadium looks like. Uh, Whether you're in Germany or you're in the UK or you're in Italy or Spain, like, it's absolutely mental. I had the opportunity to go to an Ajax game like right before everything really started shutting down, and it was kind of great to just see how it is. Like, once you start really going to matches and you see how people conduct themselves in real life and how the police conduct themselves, it'll change your whole perspective. So, like, if they defunded the police and re-educated the police, okay, demilitarize the police, we stop giving them all toys to play with, and then, it's kind of hard. Of course, if somebody gives you a beautiful, brand new, gorgeous gun, you, don't you want to shoot it? Like,
Right.
they're like, hey, we're gonna give you guys all these new riot shields and these toys and these helmets and this body armor that makes you look like, you're in Star Wars, like doing the Imperial March, but, like, don't use them. It's kind of
Right.
weird. So, like, in the EU, they've like stopped kind of giving police like riot helmets, riot shields. They stopped all that for the most part because they realize, like, if your police are set up and they're doing their marches and they're lining up like they're going into battle, then tensions rise and people are going to feel like they're under attack. And then the police are going to feel like they have to defend something. They have to, like, do something when really nobody really has to do anything. They want to keep the peace, don't they? Like, but if you dress up like you're going into war against your own people, you could kind of see, like, where the confusion came from. And what's going on right now is disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
I know people, like, there's that young girl, I think it's Sarah Goodman, is that her name? She was killed by tear gas. She was a young OSU graduate, new grad at OSU,
Wow.
and
I
she
didn't know.
died from being tear gassed. She had an asthma attack, and they refused to give her medical attention. And she
Wow.
passed away, and things like that shouldn't be happening. Like, it should be harder to be a police officer. It's very difficult to become a doctor. It's very difficult to become a nurse. It's very hard to become a pilot. You can't have a few bad pilots, as they say, because
Right.
planes will crash. So, it's not right. And Black Lives Matter. I'm from a strong military family, a military legacy that goes back hundreds of years in this country. And I'm very, very proud of my contribution in this country. I'm not going to say that I'm not going to let anybody tell me that my family has not worked hard enough to be here. We've been here for 400 years. We've been grinding away. We know who we are. Okay. If it wasn't for Black America, we wouldn't have, like, Jack Daniel's whiskey. It was a slave's recipe. Okay, Nearest Green invented Jack Daniels, so there would be no American style whiskey without Black people. Okay, American style barbecue, so much of that influence does come from Black culture, the use of spices and everything. And plus, who
Mm-hmm.
was the servant class at the time? Okay, who were the people who would be making the barbecue? Because they didn't have refrigeration, so it wouldn't be like going long distances. So if you were, like, on a plantation and you had to butcher your own meat, we got the scraps, which is why people ended up eating things like ribs and brisket, and now it's a delicacy. Just like
Mm.
lobster used to be a poor people food, but then, like, people got a taste for it, and now lobster is considered a delicacy. Brisket, ribs are the same way. And also rock and roll. All of modern rock and roll can be traced back to Black music. All of modern pop music can be traced back to Black music. Rock and roll is just sped up blues. Uh,
Right.
yeah, Sister Rosetta Tharpe. She was so amazing. She was really a pioneer of rock and roll who was all but erased until recently. It's been uncovered. So her influence, Chuck Berry's influenced the Beatles, influenced Elvis, and you could trace it all back to Black music. Blues, jazz,
Jazz.
bebop, funk, soul, disco, hip hop. house music and electronic music comes from funk, disco, jazz, funk, disco, soul, R&B. Like you could trace it all back to like African American music. And so I'm very proud of my African American heritage, very proud to be descendant of people who were enslaved. And I really have like a lot of pride for that. And I don't want to let anyone belittle my people's contribution. And anyone who says that we haven't worked hard enough and we haven't earned our keep is lying. They have an
Yeah.
agenda that they want to fulfill, because we know all men and women are created equal. We know that racism isn't real. We know that the human genome is 99.8% the same. And we know that the class structure of the past has been abolished. Okay. It has no place in the modern world. And I know people want to be celebrating Confederate heritage, but you can celebrate being from the South without celebrating the Confederacy. They're not mutually exclusive. The Confederacy
Mhm.
is gone. It's over, and people just need to be okay with that. And you could be proud of being from Texas without flying the flag, which was treasonous. Like, it's illegal to fly the Nazi flag in Germany. It's illegal to show Nazi paraphernalia in Germany. So I think now the Confederate flag is finally being seen for what it really is. And again, nobody's trying to take people's heritage, but it's just time to kind of move on, as they say.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, it shows you. I think it puts in display how racist the United States actually is. It's rooted deeply into the country because you have all these statues, these honorings across the South, honoring these Confederate soldiers and captains and whatnot, and it's kind of it's a subliminal thing. Like it's not maybe like on purpose, but deep down you're showing that whatever that was good and should be celebrated, you know.
yeah, I think it's quite weird that they have like this whole lost cause idea that they're like still kind of pining for a rematch, and they've just tried to bait the entire country into having a rematch, and everyone was like, no, this is absolutely insane. I think the most horrible thing about Confederate ideology is it's built on a lie,
Hmm.
of white supremacy. Like, whiteness is a colonial concept. Okay, so in Europe, there's no such thing as being white because everybody has their unique culture. So you're Dutch, you're Irish, you're Italian, you're from England, they're from France. There's no such thing as whiteness in Europe because everybody has their own unique culture. But if you're from a colonial country that had a history of colonization, there was oftentimes a history of a racial caste system, right?
Hmm.
So like, whiteness was just a term used for anybody European who is part of the ruling class that came over to administer the colony. Okay, they're
Right.
part of the colony's administration. Okay, so and plus most of the people that were working in the colonies were brown. So it was a very easy way to separate the classes, like, do it by race. But if you go to Europe, whiteness doesn't exist. Like, it's not a thing in Europe. They all have their own unique cultures. Like, even within the United Kingdom, like, is it so united? You've got, England,
Yeah.
Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. Then you've got, Ireland has its independence, and there's all sorts of conversation happening there. Scotland had a referendum, I think last year or 2 years ago, where they're trying to be independent. Like, people have been talking about it, or like, one United Ireland is a conversation that I can't even talk about because I don't really know enough to even say anything about that. Like,
Yeah.
don't know enough culturally to even have an opinion. So, but like, these are all these things happening. So anybody who's talking about white heritage or European heritage, it's like, well, do you speak German? Do you speak Dutch? Do you speak French? Have you been to France? Have you been to Germany? Have you been to England? Do you have any family there? Do you actually know what those cultures are like? Because, like, yeah, at a certain point of time, like, white people in Europe were peasants. And when you actually look at the documentation and you look at the historical documents of what relegated or regulated the classes, they basically had to give their labor and their homage and whatever to their, the aristocracy. And now it's kind of like, again, a social contract. In the Netherlands, there's a very high standard of living, even though the monarchy is preserved. Okay, they have limitations in their power. They're supposed to stay neutral. So there's politics that go on, but they stay neutral. But the quality of life here is very high because they realize, like, hey, like, you should take care of the people that you have like working for you and creating your way of life. So it's very sad to me to see people like build this Confederate idea of white supremacy that doesn't actually exist. And it's kind of used to manipulate people into believing a system that doesn't work anymore, when they were basically like the soldier class for the European aristocracy. Maybe it was okay because they basically were going over there to do a job, right? Like you're going over there to like maintain these systems for our wealth, right? But like in the modern world, it has no place. It's just primitive. It's primitive behavior. It's uncivilized and it's unfit. It's an unfit ideology for a civilized modern nation. And I think it's quite sad that they try to trash European culture by aligning themselves with it, even though they don't know anything about European culture. And it is tough because you can be proud of America for so many more reasons than a connection with racism. And I think that that's something that needs to be said in terms of like being proud of your heritage. I'm super proud to be African American. You will never hear me stand up and dismiss and degrade my own people. It's never going to happen. We've worked hard enough, and we were not compensated at all.
Right.
After World War II, the Nazis all went to trial, died, and like Jewish people got reparations, and we never really got any of that. And we're not really screaming that much about it, but like, it would be nice if we could get like home loans, affordable housing loans. We could get like affordable education. I don't want, why is affirmative action going to go to people that like weren't around to like make those decisions happen? It's quite strange. So like, we just want equity. Okay.
Right.
It's equality, but also we need equity. It's not just equality, it's equity. And it's there's nothing wrong with it. Okay. So like right now in Europe, there's a lot of interesting conversations happening because there's been a lot more immigration in Europe from like African countries and Middle Eastern countries. And all of a sudden there's huge culture clashes. It's not really racist. It's more of a cultural issue because you have somebody who's like coming from the Middle East from an ultra conservative country, where women have to cover their faces and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you're gay, they're going to do an honor killing. Right.
Right.
And then you're bringing them to a culture where people are completely free. Women are free to say what they want. Women are free to lead. People can be gay. It doesn't matter. Like literally, it does not matter if you're gay. Like most of Western Europe's over that kind of stuff. Like, unless you're in the former Soviet bloc, like they really just don't care. It's not even like a conversation that has to be had. It's boring at this point. So it's quite interesting, like in terms of like the evolution of culture. So like right now, there's conversations going on about like a Dutch tradition called like Zwarte Piet. And I don't really understand the Dutch tradition, and I don't think it's racist because I just don't care about it. Like, it's such a small thing for me. Like, for our history, Black people were literally hunted in the streets, and like you had things like the Green Book, which had to give you a map on how not to die if you take a road trip, because you end up in the wrong town, which are called sundown towns. They're probably going to kill you after dark. And this is happening, first of all, this still happens, okay? Because like, just like with Ahmaud Arbery not being charged, nobody being charged for his murder until the footage came. Some of these places, people control everything, right? Mm-hmm. They like to manipulate the law. They like to be the law, as they say. But like, in terms of Dutch culture, like what's happening here, I think it's more of like a misunderstanding. I think people coming over from like Africa, coming over from the Middle East, but mostly like Africa and stuff, like the Middle East wasn't colonized. So like they still have their own very strong culture, and the Middle East has a very strong global culture and a very strong trade culture. So that like they're very similar. When it comes to Africa, like Africa was colonized. So if you're talking about racism from the guise of colonization, then like it is a racial caste. So when they talk about racism, they talk about white people. If you were in Africa or if you were in South America, like white people was the thing. They didn't differentiate between like your class. So like in South Africa was an English and Dutch colony, and there was the Boer War, and there was, they fought each other. But if you were Black, those two people were the same. They were just higher in the caste system.
Right.
All right. But like, if you go to actual Europe, if you go to uncolonized countries in Europe, they have their own class system that has nothing to do with race. The class system in Europe has nothing to do with race. So people who are working class in Europe don't understand why people are upset at them from like other countries, because for them, like, the caste system has nothing to do with your race. There are
Mhm.
people who've been in Europe for 1,000 years who are still broke and poor, so they're really confused. And I think that some people are getting offended because there's just a misunderstanding, but this is just a side effect of globalization. Like, the world is modernizing all of a sudden. For the first time in history, everyone can communicate instantaneously. We're sharing ideas instantaneously. People are finding out so many interesting things about people's cultures, and it's very it can be very confusing at times. Even as an American, like, being over here, sometimes there's just little things that I have to like remind myself that I'm like not home. Like, when I do my laundry and like the clothes never get completely dry, you gotta like hang them up, even if you put them in the dryer. They never get dry. Just little things. Shops actually close here, like in the Netherlands or in France. Like, shops close. If you try to go shopping after 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, you can't. Everything is shut down. They like, during the weekend, I think on Sundays, shops don't open until noon. Like, there's a very set time for you to do your shopping. There's a very set time for you to do things in the morning, and there's a very set time for people to do business. And like, that's just the culture here. But it's always been the culture here. You know, the farmers markets in America that are for hipsters. I mean, here same market's been going on for like 300 years. Like,
Right.
it's very much a part of the culture. So I just think, like, people just need to chill. People need to pay Black people, Black Americans, African Americans, people who have fought and died for the United States of America, been in this country, built this country. Okay, like, they need to pay them the respect that they deserve. And like, it doesn't mean like, I don't know, there's no privilege. Like, just stop killing us. Stop killing us. Stop arresting us. We're Americans. Okay, we built the country. It's funny to me because I'm in the Netherlands now, and like, Americans came to the Netherlands and helped liberate Europe, right? We were part of
Right.
like the Allied troops. Like, we helped liberate Europe. So like, it's kind of like interesting for me to kind of come here to see, like, this would have been my ancestors, one of their first tastes of freedom. Like, I know that there's some films that depict this. Like, if you want to like a really good film that really depicts the reality of race relations in the United States, Mudbound is really, really good. Mudbound's on Netflix. Really,
Mm.
really good. Definitely watch it till the end. Try to pay attention. Try to take the time. Don't be distracted. Just watch the film. It's very, very telling. And the ending is also very telling as well. It's about a soldier who returns to the South after World War II, after fighting in Patton's army. And
Oh wow.
yeah, it's a story about
Yeah.
that, and like, how the two soldiers, one white and one Black, and kind of how racism enslaves them both. Like, racism, like, they're like racism. People who are racist are programmed to be racist. It's something that you get from a lot from family. People aren't born racist. So if anybody out there is doing the work to kind of deprogram themselves from that kind of mentality, I just want to say thank you. And like, I know you're trying, and like, keep trying. And it's going to be hard to understand, and there's things you're not going to get, and that's fine. But like, the fact that you even made the effort to kind of want to understand people is fantastic. And that's how we grow as human beings. Like, man, like, we live in such a beautiful time. You know, like, you could argue that the internet is a new Tower of Babylon. You know, like, we are communicating again, as a human species, and so much good positive change has come of it. And I just think we have to be more responsible, because if we elect bad leaders, if we let power run rampant, that same technology that could set us free could also enslave us again. Data has surpassed the value of
Right.
gold this year. We just need to be responsible. And like this, people are allowed to build wealth. People are allowed to be successful. No one wants to make this a communist country. Like, nobody's talking about that at all. But like, you could have responsible capitalism. Okay, you could have like ethical capitalism, where like, there's enough money for everyone to have it. The fact that, the richest billionaires in the country made like $500 billion during COVID-19, but 40 million Americans have lost their jobs. So that's one in every 4 or 5 American adults have lost their jobs. Like, they don't need that money. They don't care about that money. They're not doing anything with that money. They're just buying more stock or buying back their own stock, and then just creating more wealth. But like, really, it should be going into communities. Like everything that we're spending on the military, everything that we're spending on the militarization of police, we could be spending in schools. We should be spending in healthcare. It's very sad for me as a former healthcare worker to have cops in body armor, but like nurses and techs and respiratory therapists and all sorts of people, doctors, not being able to get the PPE they need. So it's just very
Dressed
disheartening.
in
I think,
trash bags.
yeah, we can do better as Americans, and that should be an exciting challenge for us. I think that's such an exciting challenge for us to want to be better as Americans and kind of once again try to have the highest standard of living in the world. Because right now we're dropping lower on every single list. We are not winning anymore. Okay,
Right.
we need to do better for ourselves and for each other, because a country is only as strong as its weakest members.
Right.
Okay, and like we need to do better for Americans, because like, you know, we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our heritage, and we owe it to like our future and our children. There's so many new challenges facing the next generation. um it's a beautiful time, and I think that we just need to embrace it. I think what we're seeing now is like there's been such a huge change in culture and technology from 50 years ago that a lot of people are shocked, especially the older generation. And now, like, even in the most rural places, you can be connected to people halfway around the world, so people aren't isolated anymore. Places in the United States that were isolated even in the 90s, all of a sudden people have access to new information, and it's quite cool. And like, you know, soccer's a way to kind of take it all offline and like put it in an environment that everybody understands. You know, like just have a beer, sit down, let's chat. Who are you? Like, what's your name? Where are you from? What's your story? Oh, cool. Do you want to come with us? We're doing this. Do you want to help with a banner? Do you want to help make flags? Do you want to carry, you know, you want to light a smoke flare? Like, what do you want to do? Like, you know, you want to help us with some tifo? Like what's going on? Like, let's sing, let's make some songs, let's have some fun and enjoy each other's company. And you know, it's funny to me because like Dr. Martin Luther King's dream was a fantasy at the time. It wasn't reality. It was a
Mm.
fantasy. But like we have the potential to be the generation that achieves that. And it's not, it's what's supposed to happen. Like this is the natural evolution of the human species. Like this is the only, like I consider myself a very spiritual religious person. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus Christ, and I genuinely believe that like the only constant that God shows us is change. Change is the only constant in the universe.
Mm.
Um, Everything else is subjective, but change is inevitable. So it must mean that like God wants us to move forward. You know, anybody who tries to move backward, there's usually like so much backlash. Even now, like people, you know, unfortunately, like I said, this Confederate mindset is quite sad to me. It's just, especially since it's not entrenched in any reality, and they all believe a horrible lie that's been told to them over hundreds of years. And I feel so bad, but we can break free of that now. Okay, we're all breaking free from this emancipation, in terms of like this racial hierarchy and this racial caste, and we can do it together. We can make it fun. Like we
Yeah.
can make it fun. Like it can all just be one big party. And you know, I'm kind of excited for that too, you know.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And honestly, I think that's the best way to deal with the situation is you have to be positive. You have to think of change in a positive way and move forward, like you said, rather than backwards. And I think this is honestly the perfect way to also end the episode, because we're almost at an hour time. So thank you for really coming into this podcast, sharing your opinion, sharing your life experiences, um, giving me wisdom, because you said a lot of things that I had no idea about. So
Thank you.
thank you so much for really joining me. Where can the people of Austin, Texas, or anyone listening to this pod find you or get in touch with you?
Well, my Twitter account is at broad and abroad, broad end, like the letter N, and then abroad. And to be honest with you, I kind of took a break from a lot of stuff. Like I've been starting my own company. It's taking a lot of my time. It's a SEO company.
Hmm.
And to be honest with you, the Twitter is the best way to get in touch with me. I'm trying to write the paperwork right now for a um, Black leadership in soccer SEO. I'm sorry, SEO nonprofit. And then also like this whole scenario about how my experience in Europe has impacted me. I think I'm going to try to start a nonprofit organization to encourage kids to study in other countries, because to be honest with you, you can go to college, you can go to university in Germany for free if you speak German.
Right.
So it might be beneficial for kids to learn other languages, to go study in other places and kind of open their worldview, because that's what softens your heart. That's what really kind of brings you connected to the fact that we are one world, and it's a beautiful thing. And there's no shame in being working class. I think like, America is kind of like, destroying trades right now and kind of getting rid of unions and kind of demonizing being working class. But being working class is beautiful. And there's so much skill. There's so many skills out there and talented people. So we can learn a lot from each other.
Awesome. Thank you, Imani. Thank you so much. Um, Again, guys, if you like this episode, please follow Bright Verde on all your podcast platforms. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube. You can follow me at Marcelo Perotti FC on Twitter. We got Instagram, Bright Verde Pod, Facebook, Bright Verde Pod. Thank you, Imani, for coming into this episode.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marcelo, for having me. It's awesome, man. Listos.
Later.